blue box that opened up like this, and I don't know where they are.
Certain thing that had special
stole it.
metals and other things, so like the theater operation and so on. That
Yeah,
get a star,
battle
they wouldn't
stars
get,
and
yeah,
stuff like that, the various battles.
yeah.
Then we got one from Shanghai Shek, but it was or something or other.
Oh, really?
I don't even know if we ever worked.
You got something from Chiang Kai-shek?
Well, I'm out, yeah.
Ah.
Our outfit.
And going back to World War I, this is what they hung in the window.
Yeah, but what did they have? What did they have? They had something, a star.
We
didn't they?
had, what did they call that?
I'm sure they had a star.
Because we had 2 stars and
Because
our flag in the window.
Both you two were over there, right?
We're gone.
Huh.
Yeah. And here is Grandpa's troop ticket on the Leviathan during World War I.
Now, what was the, oh, is that what took him over there?
Yeah.
Either over or
US
back, I don't know which.
Navy Armed Transport, there isn't a date on
I
it. No
think it's
date.
that way over he was on.
Orders, never touch closed airports and close watertight doors. They've got all the, don't lose this ticket, always carry it with you, you will be required to show it.
Or you can't go to the war. Wouldn't that have been a
They
shame?
landed in southern England somewhere. I'm trying to think, was it Plymouth or was some coastal, southern coastal England.
Yeah.
I can't remember what
When
it was.
Grandpa went over?
Mhm. And then we went from there to France eventually.
So we went over alone. We didn't go in convoy because we were trying to think of the name of it. And this particular ship had burned all the way from Singapore to someplace. I mean, it had a lot of history attached to it, but the fact that it went fast enough, we didn't have
They didn't have to hang around the convoy. They could outrun
Right.
us up,
Oh,
right?
that's the
Zigzag.
one you were on.
to zigzag.
Hey, that's terrific.
And
Huh.
it was a beautiful sight to get up. I always remember that first morning, we could feel the light, because it was one of those deals, on a Saturday, all right, hurry up, and get in line, march on the ship, And we sat on it for a whole week outside of Boston, Boston Harbor, yeah. And we took off, I think it was like the following Saturday morning, you could feel the movement, the vibration. And
Hopefully
gee, we went up
engines.
on deck, and you could see this beautiful white foamy path, zigzag, for
Behind the boat, huh?
looked like for maybe a mile behind,
Why did they wait, you suppose, till?
That's the Army. They
Oh.
put us on, and I think they put one other outfit on, and our colonel was very generous. He volunteered us for KP, so we alternated every other day,
Now, is that the one you said everyone was so seasick on when you were going
No, that was
over?
coming back. That was on
Oh.
a Liberty ship, which was one of Kaiser's ships.
I think I was on the Kaiser ship coming back. Of course, I flew over, so I didn't have to go over the ocean when there was threat of subs, because the war was over and I come back there.
How did you decide to get into the medical corps? Was that
I
decided
did.
for
They
you?
decided for me. All I knew was how to put a Band-Aid on a finger, maybe,
What, during basic or AIT or when did they say, you're-
They picked the intellectuals.
Oh.
No, we didn't know.
Well, Lee Hogan was the same way. I think he was a medical corpsman of some sort.
Yeah.
Oh, was he?
Mhm.
I don't even remember whether we knew until we got up there, Fort Devens, whether we were in the medical corps or not. All I know is that we left, and the rumor was that we were going to get our basic training overseas, and we really thought we were, because we kept going east, and we went around. All of a sudden, we went right around. You could see the Statue of Liberty, and we went north. And when we got off up there in Massachusetts, we thought we were at the end of the world,
Yeah.
Was that where you did basic in
Is
Massachusetts?
that Fort Devens?
Up in Fort Devens, yeah. And
Did you join him there?
Yeah, I followed him around, and we were in Fort Devens, and then we were in Camp Campbell? No. Then we went to Washington.
went to Washington,
You had a job there for a
Washington.
while, didn't you?
Yeah, I worked with the United Nations Interim Commission on Food and Agriculture.
Is the way you pronounce that?
Oh, UNILM, whatever it is,
Yeah.
yeah. And then we went to Hopkinsville, Kentucky, and that's when Dad left and went overseas.
That was the place where we had the room, we'd go in and I'd go in and out of the window.
Is that where in Kentucky?
Yeah.
Yeah,
You're getting out
I
the
was,
window.
I had this
In the
room
door.
in this little
And,
house.
when was that? 3 years ago, but we came back from Florida and we went over 24 to 57 and up that way, but we stayed in Hopkinsville, didn't we?
Mhm.
And we drove around and by golly, we were wondering which of the two houses was the one we were in. And we decided that the particular house was the one that we stayed in. And when we got home, Mom got the picture out. And there
Yeah.
were certain little ornamentations on the porch, and a typical old, with a porch.
And they
that
had
was level almost with the
tobacco
ground.
floors, as they
And,
call them. You could smell the tobacco and
Hmm.
when you walk through the street. Well, now, Bob, you were stationed mostly in Texas, weren't you?
Well, during my training, you go to
In the air car.
primary training and then basic training and advanced training. There were 3 stages learning to fly, but even before that I went to Texas. And then they sent me to Tulsa. And we went to school at the University of Tulsa for
Oh, I remember
a
that.
couple of months. And then down to San Antonio, which they called SACC, S-A-A-C-C. And from there, we finally got shipped out to primary training school. Well, we had some Piper Cub type training in Tulsa. They'd take us out in civilians or train us over there. So I stayed in Texas all that time. I went to Bruce Field in Ballinger, Texas for primary, and then my dad came down and visited me. And we got a picture of him standing at the train station in Ballinger, Texas. And he kind of got a kick out of that trip because we talked about it. He said that was the best trip we had ever had and stuff
Oh,
like
he
that.
was so excited to go down and see him.
Yeah, first time I saw him there, I was taxiing a plane, a training plane. And see, with the engine in front of you, what you do is you go to the left a little bit so you can see, and then you turn it back to the right so you can see over this way. And he saw me coming in and he thought I was goofing up because I'm going back and forth.
Oh,
But I saw him, I waited and we got out and talked. And I had to explain to him later, no, that's the way you're supposed to. Instead of going blind straight ahead, you might hit something.
Yeah. Well, now, where?
How old
when
were
did-
you when you went down there?
Oh, I don't know, 19, I guess.
19.
I remember when we took you down, it
Oh,
was
that
back
was
like
sad.
on Dearborn Street or something, where was it?
Dearborn Street Station, I think
Yeah.
it
Yeah, a whole
was, the
bunch
train
of them were
station.
down
And
there,
they
yeah.
had the street closed off and everybody's crying.
Yeah.
And, oh, that was.
Tell them about the Chinese, Bob, how they shove each other out the
Well, you
window.
went over to China, and basically you were a troop carrier. And
Well, we were in the Troop Carrier Command, and it was near the front lines. They had Air Transport Command, which was like the airlines for the Army airport. But they never got really into the combat zones. But we were in the combat zones, and we would fly supplies from a railhead like at Sam, India, for instance, over the hills into Burma. And we either land and unload them, or we would push them out the doors in the back, or we'd drop them by parachute, or something like that to get their supplies to them, and then we'd go back to a SAM and get another load. That time we were flying every other day. We'd get up early in the morning and take off about dawn, and we'd fly midnight and 1 o'clock in the morning, back and forth like a shuttle, with supplies.
Now, is that flying the hump?
Well, that particular thing that I described was just going over to India. There's a mountain range between India and Burma. We're going over to Burma. And, but that isn't really the hump. The hump is between Burma and China, which is further east. But we started out supplying the troops in Burma because that's where the fighting was going on. And then pretty soon we started flying over the hump to China because that was where the fighting was going on. And then we would fly everything from a pipeline to live goats to hospital plane to the Chinese troops. And I think you made reference to the Chinese troops. And
yeah, I was reading your letters back in Hinsdale, a year or so ago, that Mom and Grandma had made copies of, or
Yeah.
somebody made copies of, and I was reading all the others, and I was reading this about, the Chinese troops, they just get raucous and they're want to throw somebody out.
well, yeah, if some guy is standing up looking, see the door, we fly with the doors open, and they're great wide doors so you can push big boxes and things out. If they're standing there, one of his buddies will come up and knock him out the window or out the door, and Everybody laughed, and the funniest thing they
There he
ever saw.
goes, the skydiver.
No parachute.
No parachute, no.
And he's gone, huh?
He's gone.
What a sense of humor.
You flew live goats too?
Oh, yeah, you know, and trouble is, if you go very far, they have trouble standing up because it gets kind of slippery on the floor from certain excretions.
Oh, no.
Nothing like a slippery goat.
Oh, my God.
Oh, dear.
Well, what was the timing between the time that between starting times?
When we
Because you
went
said
in,
you
well,
both
you
took
went
You got in
that.
first, I know that.
No, you
No,
went in
you
first.
did.
Did I?
Yeah.
But I didn't get I didn't get into action for a long time.
Well, you were
It took me like a
training.
year to train, you know.
Yeah.
No, we,
You had to learn to
you went,
fly.
because I remember, it must have been Dearborn Street and all these people.
And the last memory I have is I was up on some second-story open platform looking down at the crowd and waving, you know.
Oh.
That's the last goodbye type thing.
And
I
that,
think Mother was crying and a few things like that, you know.
now, did you both enlist? Is that how you did it?
Well, I enlisted in the Army Air Corps, which it was called at that time. And I had done it some months before. In fact, Harlow had done it like the prior May or June. He was still around Chicago till January. And they called him in January, and then they called Harry Jordan, and then they called me, I think, in early February. We all went within about 30 days of each other. But we may have signed up 6 months ago, waiting for the call.
All pilots.
Well, not necessarily. Harry Jordan opted to be a navigator.
Oh.
They used to take the top small percentage of the test results and offer them navigator's jobs, so you had to be an acquisition as well as everything else.
Oh.
And when Harry graduated, or took the test, they decided that, well, they had them all in a big room, like 400 guys, and they said, okay, we're going to call out the ones who got the highest rating, who have the option for navigator. And the first name is Harry L. Jordan. He was the first one called.
Wow.
So he got up and says, yeah, I'll be a navigator. So he went to Italy and flew B-24s out of Italy up to Celesti and other places like that. But Harlow wanted to be a pilot, and he was, and I wanted to be a pilot, and I was. My slight regret going through training is that they didn't have any demand for fighter pilots anymore. They wanted transport pilots, so they put me in a twin-engine training program.
I bet Grandma was thrilled that that's where you were put though.
Well,
wasn't
maybe
she?
she was. There's less chance. See, we didn't have any escort, that is plane escorts or fighter escorts.
Oh, yeah.
We just flew naked, so that we had a 45 under your arm, but that doesn't help much if you're attacked by a Japanese
Oh my
girl.
gosh.
So, fortunately, I wasn't, or I wouldn't be here then.
Well, you had a big door, you go, bing!
But Harlow was a fighter pilot.
Oh, yeah, he was a fighter.
He was over in the same theater. He was not too far from where I was. Of course, they would come in later, like he'd fly out of England, I guess, at the time.
For a while.
Oh, you
and
go
then-
in first and then he,
What, honey?
you'd go in first?
Well,
on the
what I
ground?
mean is that
Well, did you go directly from
we went in,
England to
we
France?
went on to the beaches of Normandy. you see.
Uh-huh.
Well, the fighter pilots, of course, were still flying out of England in those days, because we were still on the beaches. Then as we moved further inland, at some point in time, the fighter pilots, like Harlow, would move into like Normandy or in that area and settle up. But see, they would be really behind because they were flying in and flying back to their base, as I visualize from what he says.
Huh.
Isn't that?
Yeah, well,
that's
they
basic?
finally were landing at fields there. I can remember him talking
Yeah,
about
yeah.
walking around, and he gets in some town, and there's German soldiers there, and it was supposed to be cleared out, but it wasn't. You know.
Yeah.
Oh my
So,
gosh.
Yeah.
A little miscalculation.
probably in the Brest Peninsula, but we'll ask him about that.
But he flew in on D-Day, didn't he?
Oh, I guess he did.
Yes.
Everybody did
Yeah.
on D-Day.
See, they call it hedgerow country down there in Normandy, Brittany, and these hedges, as I remember them, they're probably almost as high as the ceiling here, and they're real wide, and they were only about space from that wall maybe to the porch. And this is what made it very difficult for the fighter pilots, because they'd come down and they'd strafe and so on, and they'd be strafing our own men because, you know, they were fighting like in one room to the next, and that's where all these bees were, you know. Gee,
Oh, really?
Yeah,
What was
the
that?
hedgerow bees, huh?
I don't remember hearing about
Oh,
that.
yeah, gee, the bees, they'd, when you go to eat is what you do, you take a little jelly and you set it over here, because the bees would all go to the jelly. And this one guy, you know, Deacon Jones, he went to put something in his mouth when we were pulling out on convoy. And the bee, he didn't realize it, and the bee stung his throat. That poor guy, he was really in misery, you know.
Yeah.
But normally, they'd never sting you.
What were hedgerows, like fences?
Yeah, in a
They
sense.
were built out of, hedges.
They divide the
They divide
property, is that
different
it?
fields,
Yeah.
one neighbor from the next.
Well, they could hide.
Well, that
But it
was
was
it.
tough for our tanks to get through. They had to devise special
Yeah,
Oh,
and they were-
They used
mechanical
to cut
devices
through?
to cut through so the tanks could get through.
And you see, and then also in the beginning, what the Germans did, they put piano wire across the road. The guys in the Jeeps, they'd go, oh, and they'd cut their head off. So finally, they put like an angle iron up in the front, an angle like that, so on the
Oh,
bumper,
hit
see,
that
so when
first.
the Jeeps would go, it'd cut the wire.
now this was in France,
No,
was this?
well,
or-
in France, yeah, down in Normandy and Brittany in the very early days,
What a different type of area you both were in. I mean,
Mine
you're
was
fighting a
really-
war over there in the Far East
When I
and,
was stationed in Assam, India, it's called Lido. It's the head of the Lido Road. It kind of wound zigzag over the hills into Burma too. But we'd take a hike outside of the airstrip area, and you'd find natives there where the women were bare-breasted and they lived like savages, It was,
Really?
Yeah.
They like that one.
something.
Well, they weren't all bad people. They were Naga Indian. Well, certain branches of them were headhunters, but we discounted that. Nothing ever happened to us. We didn't get our heads cut off or anything like that. It's very remote areas that we
Yeah.
hadn't seen any other civilization yet.
It was like two different worlds. Well, it was two different worlds. We didn't give thought to over there too much because we were thinking too much about until the war was over in Europe, and I know our outfit was to come back to the States and remain in strategic reserve and then go to Japan. And
It's necessary. But I don't imagine you're too hot for that. My first reaction after the victory in Europe was, hooray, we'll get some help, because we were perennially short of what we thought we should have.
Yeah.
But it never happened. They just started sending all the guys that were there home. They thought the war was over, but they hadn't really conquered French Indochina and that sort of thing properly. They
yeah,
conquered the Japanese, but not the resistance fighters.
yeah.
So, when did they call you? Or did you
I went in
enlist or?
1943 in August.
The 4th of July, let's see, you were inducted on the 3rd of July.
Is that right?
Can you imagine that?
No
Wow.
kidding.
And then he got a few weeks to get
Yeah,
ready.
I came up here and we spent about a week or two.
What were you doing in 1943? Working for your dad? At
Oh,
office
no.
managing or what?
No, I had, when I was with Cameron Can Machinery, as a matter of fact, I suppose if I really wanted to, they talked about, because they were doing it for war work,
Deferments.
see. But I didn't want that. And, yeah, that's,
Of course, it's funny, we were married 2.5 years when Frank went in, and Mother and Dad were married 2.5 years.
Really?
When Dad went into World War I, and they had these little golf balls things in Washington, and they would pull these numbers out, and Dad was number 3 pulled out.
There's a big glass.
Yeah.
Or something.
Yeah.
Glass.
if it was the lottery, they never pulled it
Uh-huh.
out.
And those numbers, apparently in all different areas,
Mhm.
were called up. see.
Oh.
And they had like 2 days, didn't they, or
Something
something?
like that. He was going
To
Battle Creek real
arrange
fast.
for
all?
everything,
Mhm.
to, they weren't as organized as they were in World War II, but
Now,
they.
where were you at that point? I mean,
in
where
Blooming.
was Granite?
They were living in Grand Rapids.
Okay.
And Grandpa had 2 restaurants. Grandma didn't know anything about running those. They had made out a will. Oh, they had to run around and do all these different things. And then Grandma ran the restaurants during the war. And it was like a 24-hour deal.
Oh, my God.
And they kept calling men up all the time, so she'd lose her
All
health.
the workers.
And I've forgotten when she sold the one restaurant, whether she sold it then.
I don't remember us ever owning it, so it had to be way back
So,
during the war time.
yeah.
Now, where were Grandma and Grandpa Rosander at that point? Were they living with?
They
came
came over then.
When
They
where had they
left-
been?
From Chicago.
They left Chicago and came over because mother was alone. And they called Dad up. Well, you know, no arranging for anything. They had to go.
Remember when they did the lottery, when I was in the lottery in '69, that they called them out 15, they did it on television.
Oh, boy.
And they had the big glass drum, and they were
Yeah.
calling out, they're lifting out ping pong balls with birth dates on them. And they did them 15 at a time, and they'd take a break and do a commercial.
Yeah.
And they'd call out 15, you know, we had that little orange television at
Yes.
Nancy's, you know, that little black light, I was sitting on the couch
Yeah.
like this.
Yeah.
You know,
Watching
and they'd pull out
deciding your
15
fate.
numbers, and I'd go, well, I didn't get it on that 15, you know, and,
No, that's really amazing as I think back with you, and then with Ralph.
In Vietnam War.
yeah.
Yeah. What was it? He was
Ralph,
one number off?
Ralph was
Yeah.
number 77 and they drew up to 75.
Yeah.
And
Couldn't
we
believe
had
it.
just been through, Dave even took his little satchel and went down for his physical
Yeah,
and
I was
everything.
I was 186. And they drafted to 190.
I think Nance said stoop over to shot him with a dart. Bob, I'll buy this round.
Okay, can I fix it? Fine.
Yeah.
Be happy to do that.
Honey, do you